What's up, everybody? My name is Alex Wilson, and I have my co-host beside me, Anthony Rivardo from Fireside Giants and Empire Sports Media Production. You're listening to the Fireside Giants podcast. If you are a diehard Giants fan, you've come to the right place. Daily episodes, interviews, draft content, and so much more. Make sure to drop a like and a subscription below on YouTube. Don't forget to leave a comment. We love to engage with everyone. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Much love from a fellow Giants fan. And today we want to talk about a couple of players who could be on the trade block. This offseason, big blockbuster deals set to kind of commence across the league. We're going to talk about Bradley Chubb from the Broncos, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Danielle Hunter, a guy that Patterson, our new defensive line coach who we brought over from Minnesota, is really instrumental in his development, really helped him and Everson Griffin become the elite players they were or are now. Zedaria Smith from Green Bay and Calvin Ridley from the Atlanta Falcons. And what's going on there? Of course, all of these are going to be kind of outlandish in terms of how the Giants get there and how they would actually acquire these guys. But we want to hit on it. We want to talk about the Giants' involvement and how the possibility of them making any deals could come to fruition. Where would they find the money? Where is the money? And what could they give up to acquire talented players who can make an impact instantly, Anthony? Before we dive into these guys, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm getting excited for the offseason. Free agency period is going to open up in the next couple of weeks, and that's kind of when trades start to happen, right? And you just see the NFL explode, right? There's so many blockbuster trades, blockbuster signings, and it's super exciting. I mean, the Giants last year, they were part of that blockbuster when they went ahead and they signed Kenny Golladay. They got the number one free agent that hit the open market. Now, of course, after 1 year, it didn't pan out. Hopefully the next 3 to 4 years, it will pan out. That's the hope. But there's always an opportunity for any team to make a blockbuster move. We've seen teams that are really tight up against the cap make some blockbuster moves, and the Giants could potentially do that. I'm not saying that they will. Do I think any of the trades that we're going to list are possible? Yes, they're possible. Are they likely? No, they're not likely. They're probably not going to happen, but it's still interesting to take a look at some of these players, see what the Giants could do if they decide to get a little risky, swing for the fences, and maybe make a big-time move, because there are a lot of really exciting names that are on the trade block, even more so than an average year. There's quite a few quarterbacks that are going to go out there and be on the trade block, and those are going to be the primary focus of the NFL media. But there's also players at other positions that the Giants need that could potentially be a much cheaper option for a blockbuster trade. So I'm excited to discuss some of these guys and take a look at what you think, Alex, about some of these potential trades that the Giants could make.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the money problem is obviously one that will come up for Giants fans. $40 million is what Joe Schoen is trying to create. How do you get there? We've created some videos regarding that exactly. James Bradbury, Blake Martinez, Sterling Shepard. There's a bevy of different players who they could release, cut, trade to clear up some salary space. And just keep in mind, some people have brought up the idea of cutting Kenny Golladay, cutting Leonard Williams. You don't exactly want to do that right now. The negative cap hit that will accrue and ensue because of cutting them would not make it a sustainable practice to release them right now, because they just signed big contract extensions last season. So that's kind of out of the picture. Now, releasing them next year is a little bit more probable. You save double-digit figures, rather in terms of just double-digit, meaning like you're not saving $3 or $4 million, but rather $10, $12 million, which could be applied elsewhere. However, you're still going to be taking on a lot of dead money because a lot of that money is guaranteed, because Dave Gettleman, once again, tried to screw us for the future. Thank you so much, Dave Gettleman, for that. But I will say there are ways the Giants can create salary space next year. Currently, they have about $92 million available. After the draft is signed this year, after the free agency and whatever, they're going to have less money. They might end up in the 80 million range, maybe 75 million range, but they can actually clear up $18 million in cap space by cutting Leonard Williams next offseason. A lot of people might, fight back against that premise, but I will say the money is valuable. And if he doesn't have a great season this upcoming year, if management sees they can replace his production, if they want to reallocate that money towards the offensive line or whatever it might be, it could be, beneficial to reallocate that money and get it back. So when we're talking about these players, keep in mind, we do have money in the future, but it will take them ways. They're going to have to restructure contracts. They're going to have to extend guys if they were to take on any of these guys and restructure the deals and push it down the road, which is not something Joe Schoen necessarily wants to do. But let's take a look at the first one, Bradley Chubb. So this is an interesting scenario, Anthony. I'll let you kind of break it down for them. It's kind of predicated on the idea of Aaron Rodgers going to the Broncos and them trying to clear some salary space and also get some of their draft capital back that they had to part ways with the Packers to actually receive him in the first place. That Rodgers and the Packers are currently in dialogue on an extension or whatever it's going to be with them. So, who knows here, but, this is an interesting scenario that I thought and Anthony thought was worth, talking about.
Yeah, an interesting one presented by Pro Football Focus, where they're kind of talking about the quarterbacks that we're going to discuss in just a second here. Aaron Rodgers, where's he going to go? No one knows right now. He's kind of mulling his options, considering returning to Green Bay, considering maybe even retirement, considering asking for a trade. He's kind of in a really interesting position where he can do whatever he wants. And that's going to be exciting because if he does decide that he wants to be traded, there is going to be a bunch of teams that want to make trade offers for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he's the reigning MVP, two-time back-to-back reigning MVP. He's still one of the best players in the NFL and one of the best players of all time. So imagine he goes to the Denver Broncos. I mean, they're going to have to make some cap space casualties in that regard. So this one that was presented by PFF is Bradley Chubb, of course, former first-round pick, 2018, was the 5th overall pick. A lot of Giants fans really liked him. A lot of analysts said that the Giants should take him with the 2nd overall pick in the draft. They went with Saquon Barkley instead. But in this scenario, it's a 3rd-round pick from the Giants. It's not even their own 3rd-round pick. It's the one from the Dolphins. So it's a middle 3rd-round pick. And the 4th-round pick, the Bears' 4th-round pick. This is kind of where you take a look at what the Giants have in terms of draft capital, and they have so many extra picks that they are in position to trade for veteran players like a Bradley Chubb or someone else, because both of these picks that are presented in this trade scenario by PFF, they're not their original picks. It's not even like the Giants are giving up any of their own picks. It's picks that they received via trades from the 2021 NFL draft. So a 3rd from the Dolphins and a 4th from the Bears. And then basically what the Giants would inherit is Bradley Chubb on a $14 million contract for 1 year, and then they'd have to extend him. Now, that's a tough sell, right? That's going to be difficult to fit that under the salary cap. Right now, the Giants are $12 million over the cap, so they'd have to clear a significant amount of money in order to acquire a guy like Bradley Chubb. But if you take a look at the long-term outlook, 2023, Giants are projected to have like $90 million in cap space. So if you're going with the long-term outlook of it, they can fit Bradley Chubb underneath the salary cap for the long run. Now, it might be a little difficult to do this year. They'll have to cut some players, but going forward, they'll have plenty of opportunities to sign players, even if they already have Bradley Chubb under contract next season. So it's in terms of the money, it can work. Now, what about the player? Is he worth the 2 draft picks plus the extension, the $14 million extension? Now, that's a whole nother discussion because this is a player that's never reached 10 sacks in a season. This is a player who didn't even play this year because he was dealing with an injury, right? He had a really gruesome injury that sidelined him for the majority of the year. And he also has never really lived up to the expectations of the 5th overall pick. Now, he's been a very good player. He played well alongside Von Miller for a couple of years, but has he reached that pinnacle, like that stardom? Not really. He went to 1 Pro Bowl. He has not really developed into a superstar player. He's just developed into probably an above average and really good edge rusher, which is something that the Giants don't have. They do have a need for a good edge rusher, and Bradley Chubb could be that guy, but I'm not sure if he is worth the investment in terms of all of the money on the contract that they would have to sign him to.
Yeah, I mean, it probably wouldn't cost too much to acquire him. Like you said, the contract is definitely a little bit cumbersome. He did not play much last year, 7 games, didn't have a single sack. He had 21 tackles. But looking back at his rookie season, right, 12 sacks, 60 combined tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 21 QB hits. He was ranked 3rd in Defensive Rookie of the Year rankings. 2020, he was a Pro Bowler. So, you look at him from a wide view, a general view, and you see a player with the upside to be great. Now, he has had 2 seasons where he played 7 games or less, so he's injury prone. Giants don't necessarily want to go after someone that might be injury prone, especially on a $14 million contract for 1 year. You're talking about this, right? You're acquiring Bradley Chubb, and then you're extending him immediately to bring that cap hit down. That's really what you're talking about here. Personally, I'm avoiding him at all costs because we have the 5th and 7th overall picks. We can go out and get a young, cost-controlled rookie at outside linebacker like a Kayvon Thibodeau, like a Trayvon Walker, like a guy like we just talked about yesterday, Jermaine Johnson out of FSU. There are a ton of young players, cost-controlled, who we can mold and build around with Andre Patterson, who's our defensive line coach now, who's had tremendous success building phenomenal pass rushers in the NFL. So I think personally, I'm going with the younger route. I'm not going with the $14 million cap hit from Bradley Chubb, especially considering he's rather injury prone. And has had a few seasons where he hasn't done much. He didn't have a sack last year in 7 games, which definitely stands out. It's kind of a bad situation. I don't think he's worth the money at this point in time, but he is established and we have seen him perform at a high level before. So there is reason to believe that there could be interest, especially if they're basically just getting him at cost, depending on the draft capital. But personally, I'm out on Bradley Chubb. Anthony, let's take a look at Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. What's going on there? I just wrote an article this morning about Daniel Jones saying that him and Dable have met and they're talking about developing a system around Daniel Jones and seeing what plays he likes. Davis Webb actually had something interesting to say, and he was like, Dable would go to players on the Buffalo Bills roster, whether it was Josh Allen or Stephon Diggs, even Jordan Poyer, who's a safety, and see what their favorite offensive plays were, and then build a system around that. They said 80 to 90% of the playbook consisted of plays that I actually got from the players. Cole Beasley was a guy who brought over 4 or 5 plays from the Dallas Cowboys that really they ended up using a lot and that are some of their best plays. So I like that mentality. Jason Garrett forced Daniel Jones to run this Norv Turner 2004 offense that was just really, really predicated on West Coast style, really short concepts. Now the offensive line definitely limited their downfield capabilities, which I acknowledge. However, it did not do anything to give Daniel Jones any advantage. He shrunk the field consistently, rolling him out to his right. The 12 personnel and your tight ends are all blocking. You don't have any receivers. 2 receivers with 6 defensive backs back there is not a winning, successful formula. So when you're looking at, potential trade here, I think that they're going to stick with Daniel Jones. I'm pretty confident they will. But if Russell Wilson at the right price became available, it's hard to say no. But again, it depends on the price. I'm not giving up 3 first rounds for Russell Wilson based on the simple fact. I know Anthony has a differing opinion than I do, because it's like you're getting maybe 6 years of elite quarterback play for 3 first round picks. That's maybe a worthwhile trade. However, I would argue the Giants are nowhere near being competitive. So you're really not getting, let's say, 5 or 6 years of elite quarterback play. Maybe you're getting the quarterback play, but the team around him is so abysmal because you don't have the draft capital now. So maybe you're getting 4 years of competent play, which maybe that's a championship winning timeline there. Who knows? But again, Russell Wilson trade, it seems unlikely, but hell, we've seen crazier things happen in the NFL. We've seen crazier trades come out of nowhere. Anthony, what are you thinking about Russell Wilson or even Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, to say it seems unlikely is almost an understatement. It seems impossible at this point. The Giants sound so dedicated to Daniel Jones. They seem so committed to him, like they really want to build the team around him. And I do think that's what they're ultimately going to decide to do. I think they're going to decide that they're going to build around Daniel Jones and put a system in front of him to make him successful. But could be smoke screens, right? Like, who knows? Of course, Russell Wilson, what if he really just comes out, public statement, I declare that I want to trade, I don't want to play for Seattle. Well, then all the teams in the league are going to take notice of that. And they're going to say, well, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So we have to at least explore the option, explore the opportunity to improve our roster. And the Giants should be no different. They should absolutely explore it. Consider it. Just take a look at it at the very least. So for Russell Wilson, if he were to, ask for a trade out of Seattle, and we know that the Giants have been on his short list of teams before. What if he reaches out, like he really wants to go to New York? That's something that the Giants are going to have to consider. Now, from what I'm reading, it would be a projected 2 first-round picks and probably a 2nd or 3rd round pick on top of that. And of course, they'd have to acquire basically a large contract of, I think it's $26 million is the cap hit for this season for Russell Wilson. So they're going to have to clear up a ridiculous amount of cap space if they want to trade for Russell Wilson in the first place. Same thing would go for Aaron Rodgers. But the principle of making that trade is the fact that you're giving up 1 to 2 first round picks. So your future for a couple of years, and you're going to get a quarterback that can propel you to the playoffs for the next 5 to 6 years. That's the whole goal and idea of trading for one of these superstar quarterbacks, whether it's Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. You're trying to get 2 to 5 years of elite quarterback play and consistent playoff appearances for 1 to 2 or 3 years of first-round picks. And if you take a look at what the Los Angeles Rams did, you can build a roster through the draft without having first-round picks. You truthfully can. Now, first-round picks they're the most likely to hit. They're the most exciting, of course, all of that. But if you have 2nd-round picks, 3rd-round picks, 4th-round picks, 5th-round picks, and you have a good general manager that knows how to draft and evaluate talent, you can still build a roster without those first-round picks. That's what the Los Angeles Rams, the Super Bowl champions, just showed everybody and proved to us on national TV. So I definitely think that if the Giants were to go ahead and give up some first round picks, it's not the end of the world to me because they are acquiring one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL that can propel them to the playoffs every year. So it is something that I personally would consider if I were in that position. I'm not, though, and I don't think that the Giants will consider it, but I do think it's something that they should consider because of the long-term outlook and the potential wins above replacement that you could gain from an elite quarterback like Russell Wilson.
Right. And, anytime you have an opportunity to land a star quarterback like that, it's something to consider. You would be ignorant not to consider it. It's the same as like Dave Gettleman not picking up the phone and drafting Saquon Barkley without hearing about any trade back scenarios. We could have Quentin Nelson right now in a probably a little bit better of a situation. But I'll say this, I just simply don't think, the Giants are in a position to make a big investment like that with little minimal money. And Russell Wilson's going to want a huge contract, even if he wants to come here. It seems like he wants a lot of control, especially within the Seahawks organization. He's been a big voice there trying to, curate change. At this point, Bradley Chubb, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, I see them kind of going other places. The Giants definitely have a little bit more rebuilding to do. Like if we were in a position right now where the roster was ready to win, I could see why this would make sense. If the Giants had a good defense, and I think they do have a good defense, but if they had a better defense, if they had good offensive line play, if they had good receivers, a good tight end, if they had all these pieces in place, you're saying like, okay, we can afford to give up the draft capital now to go after an elite quarterback. But the fact of the matter is, we have one of the most, if not the most expensive roster in football and the worst talent, the worst talent in terms of roster in football. Our depth at most positions is rather thin. So we have a lot of investment to do. But let's move on to the next player, which is actually really interesting. Danielle Hunter. So Danielle Hunter has an obvious connection with Andre Patterson from the Minnesota Vikings. That connection could be means for a potential, transition. Danielle Hunter is a 4-3 base kind of defensive end, though. Wouldn't really fit the outside linebacker mode. He's coming off a significant injury. And he is one of those guys that is a tremendous talent, has had a Pro Bowl level career up to this point. And I'm not sure his contract information, Anthony, you could pull that up for me, but essentially when you're looking at Danielle Hunter, he's a player that might not be a scheme fit for us, but he does have the connection with Andre Patterson, which is something to acknowledge. I don't think the Giants are going to be going after any of these players just personally, because I think they're going to be going with youth and cost control contracts, but he might be a cheap acquisition. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Danielle Hunter.
Yeah, so pulling up the contract info right now, according to PFF, any team that trades for him is inheriting a 2-year, $25.5 million deal. So it's about 12 to 13 million per year over the next 2 years. But he wants a new contract. He wants an extension. He wants a pay increase. So you would probably tear up that deal after the first year and give him a new contract worth close to 20 million. Like that's probably what Danielle Hunter is looking for because he is one of the best edge rushers in the NFL and he's still pretty young. He's only, I think, 27. He's still, he's not any washed up player by any means. He's a 27-year-old who's coming off of a 2019 season with 14.5 sacks, 2018 season with 14.5 sacks. Now he didn't play in 2020, struggled with injury in 2021, but when he was on the field, he was still super talented, super productive. He just struggled to stay on the field the last 2 years. But when he found his way onto the field, he looked like the same player. He was extremely productive, extremely efficient, and dominant in the trenches. But, of course, you mentioned it, the 4-3 scheme versus a 3-4 scheme. That is something to consider. His entire career, he's played in Minnesota from 2015 all the way until now. Every single year, he's been playing in a 4-3 scheme as a defensive end with his hand in the dirt. Could he realistically transition to a 3-4 outside linebacker position? I'm not so sure. So it does make a lot of sense, especially considering the fact that the Giants just hired the Vikings defensive assistant to be their defensive line coach over here, considered one of the best coaches on the Vikings staff. He's credited with the development of Danielle Hunter, and they have a phenomenal relationship. So in that regard, that connection makes a lot of sense for the Giants to try and get Danielle Hunter back with his defensive line coach, but does it work out contractually with Danielle Hunter? And also, does he even fit in this scheme with the New York Giants? He would have to transition to a 2-point stance from a 3/4-point stance. Like that is a huge difference going from the 4-3 to the 3-4 when he spent 7 years in Minnesota playing in a 4-3. So it's a huge difference right there. And that's almost the one that complicates things the most. But I do think contractually speaking, as I mentioned, you would be inheriting a contract worth 2 years, $25.5 million. So basically, for this next season, 2022, the Giants would pay him roughly $13 million. And then they would probably tear it up next year when they have $90 million in cap space and give him the deal that he desires. And it's something that they could fit under the cap long term, and they could actually make Danielle Hunter a real building block for the next 4 years on their defense. They just have their edge rusher position set up and ready to go if he's able to find a way to fit into Wink Martindale's scheme. And that's the number one thing. So it's almost like trading for him would kind of be like a prove it on the first year, and we'll see if you get an extension or if you just get traded right away after this first season. But it is something that I think the Giants should consider because of that connection with the defensive line coach, and also because of the fact that Danielle Hunter, 27 years old, and he is, when healthy, a top 5 defensive end or edge rusher in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a scheme kind of related thing, but I am interested to see how Andre Patterson makes that transition from a 4-3 to a 3-4. He's only ever really been in the 4-3 with Minnesota the past 7-8 years with Mike Zimmer. So him making that transition, I wonder if he is dabbling in the outside linebacker group, or he's really specifically focusing on Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams. So that could be an interesting thing. Hopefully he can kind of bring out the best in those guys. And I think, Dexter Lawrence specifically, he's a guy who we've all had tremendous expectations for, and he's really kind of failed to get to that next level. So hopefully, he's a guy that really steps up and makes an impact, especially in the run game moving forward and as a pass rusher. So hopefully Andre Patterson can unlock that potential there. But like you said, Danielle Hunter is definitely a great player when he's healthy, but we're talking about Bradley Chubb, Hunter, both guys are coming off injury, and it's tough to wrap my head around it personally, of acquiring guys like that, especially with their contracts in tow. Another guy that stands out in a potential scenario is Darius Smith. He's a guy that, the Packers have considered, I guess, parting ways with, or, trying to get some more draft capital from. So it's interesting. He's kind of up for an extension. He could be part of their team. They're saying that his price range is a little bit outside of their comfort zone. He's also coming off a season where he played one game. He played 16 games in 2 consecutive seasons, 2019, 2020, was Pro Bowls in both, 13.5 sacks, 12.5 sacks. If there's any player that we've talked about so far that I would actually be okay at grabbing, it would be Zedaria Smith, because this guy's actually a stud. He has 2 consecutive Pro Bowls before this season. He missed the whole year this year. But, I'm looking at him and I'm saying, he's actually the type of impact player, and he's a scheme fit. That's a player that I think would be a good grab for the Giants, because coming off the injury, he might be a little bit cheaper. Is he under contract right now? Do you know?
Yeah, he's under contract, and the contract that would be inherited by the team trading for him is 1 year, $15.75 million. So
it's a lot.
The Giants were to make this trade, they would get Zedaria Smith. The projected draft capital that they would have to give up is a 4th-round compensatory pick. That's what this article from PFF is saying. You're giving up a late 4th-round pick, maybe a middle 4th-round pick, or an early 5th-round pick even. You're giving up a middle-round pick, which the Giants historically haven't drafted well with, and I understand we have new management in place that will draft a lot better, we hope. But middle round pick, especially when the Giants, if you take into consideration the fact that they have extra picks from those trades that they made last year, they've got the draft capital to make any of these trades work. It's just about whether or not they can fit these trades under the salary cap. So yeah, they can clear some cap space. They can make some moves, clear up that $15 million for Zedaria Smith, and we know he would be a perfect scheme fit, because where did he cut his tires in the NFL? Like, he started off with the Baltimore Ravens. It was when he played for the Ravens with Wink Martindale in 2018 that got him that big contract in free agency with Green Bay. 2018, he had his breakout 8.5 sack campaign. He went over to Green Bay, 13.5 sacks, 12.5 sacks, and of course he was injured this season, but he's had really productive seasons over in Green Bay. But it started off, he got his start in the NFL with the Baltimore Ravens under Wink Martindale's defensive scheme, 3-4 fit. I mean, he is a perfect fit for the Giants scheme because he's already played in it once before early on in his career. So I think this one does make sense for the Giants, and I think that they could probably get him for really cheap in terms of the draft capital. Yes, the contract is a little bit expensive, but it would be really cheap in terms of draft capital. And then once they were to get him on their roster, I think that, he would just play out this contract, would go into free agency next year and maybe extend him. But whatever contract he gets the following year, I think is going to be relatively cheap considering what it was the last time he hit the open market. So Zedaria Smith probably on his way down. Career trajectory is trending downward at this point for Zedaria Smith, but he's still a very solid and capable player when he's healthy. And I think that if the Giants were to take this chance on him with a middle round pick, we would all be happy about that as long as they could fit him under the salary cap space, which they would be able to eventually. They just have to cut some players, but they can make it work, and they would be getting a very good player for super low risk. This is a very low risk, high reward move, and that's why I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, again, it's all about the money. It always will be when it comes to these guys. Zedaria Smith actually is a very, very good player who would fit our scheme perfectly. I'm sure Wink Martindale would love to have him. And 15.7 million, that's no joke, right? If the Giants were to grab him, you're talking about instantly extending him, and he may not even want that. He may want to play out this year and then get a bigger extension because he thinks he can kind of return to form. So he might just want to play out the last year of that contract. So there's a lot predicated on that. But if he's open to be extended immediately, the Giants could say, "Hey, man, like we'll bring you in, we'll extend you immediately. We can push that cap hit down a little bit for this year." But again, like kicking the can down the road does not seem like something Joe Schoen wants to do at this time. Again, very unlikely this happens. We just want to talk about it because NFL draft coming up. There's a lot of stuff that's about to happen with free agency. And the draft, and trades are obviously going to happen. And the Giants aren't in the best spot to make them, but we do have a lot of money next year, so there's ways to do things. If you got Darius Smith, you could theoretically sign him to an extension, then cut Leonard Williams and reallocate that money. There's things you can do. There's ways to supplement whatever. But I don't think that they will make any of these moves. But it's fun to talk about nonetheless because you never know what's going to happen. But let's move on to Calvin Ridley. This is the last one we're going to talk about because Calvin Ridley is an interesting player, right? Was with the Atlanta Falcons. He's arguably a wide receiver one when healthy. However, he kind of quit on the team halfway through the year last season for mental health issues. So I don't know if I trust that he will be ready to play. I don't know much about what's going on with him. I don't know if he's going to be coming back. I don't know if he's ready to come back. Taking on his deal, taking on that situation is not something I would advise if I were the Giants brass. But again, anything is possible. If he's like, I'm ready to play, I want to come back, and the Falcons are like, he's done enough damage, we want to just send him on his way. He's a player you pair with Kadarius Toney, you pair with Kenny Golladay, and he fits seamlessly into your system. And he's a potentially elite player. So, it obviously is something to talk about, Anthony. But what do you think about Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, I think this one's interesting because, again, I think it's a it's a medium risk. I'd say it's a medium risk, but the reward is really high if this pays off. If you acquire Calvin Ridley and he returns to form like he played in 2020, I mean, he was a second team All-Pro. He was really freaking good. He had 1,300 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. And even in his rookie season, he scored 10 touchdowns as a wide receiver too. He scored 7 in 2019. He's always been a touchdown scorer, and he's always been a great red zone threat and a solid receiver no matter what. In 2020, he had a real breakout, turned into a WR1 for the Falcons. So I think he might be on his way out just due to the fact that he hasn't played this past season. A lot of people see it as quitting. I personally don't see it that way. I just think he had some things off the field that he needed to deal with, and he hopefully has it sorted out by now. It seems very likely that he does get traded. I think he needs a change of scenery, and it's probably best for the Falcons just to cut their losses and take whatever they can for him. But from the projection of the trade, people are saying second or third round pick for Calvin Ridley. Now, if you said that a year ago that you wanted to trade for Calvin Ridley, it's probably a first round pick and the second round pick because he was that good in 2020, right? Like he was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. So just a year's difference because he didn't play because he was dealing with mental health issues. And now his price tag in terms of a trade has dropped exponentially. If you were to take this price tag from this year, compare it to the one from last year, and somehow get the same level of play out of Calvin Ridley that you got, that the Falcons got last year, you're talking about a bargain. Like that is a bargain if he turns back into a wide receiver one. So it is kind of one of those medium to high risk moves because you don't know if he's going to return to that form. And it also is a second round or a third round pick, which is kind of a premium, but it's not the first round pick that it once was. And if he does return to form, the reward is probably way higher than the risk because he's a touchdown scorer, a red zone threat in every sense of it, and he's also just one of the best route runners in the NFL. I mean, Calvin Ridley fits into every single offensive scheme. He is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL when healthy. So I think this is one that the Giants probably aren't going to consider because they have too much money tied up into the wide receiver position already with Kenny Golladay, and they have young talent like Kadarius Toney. But I do think for other teams around the NFL, Calvin Ridley should be a top target for teams like the Patriots, maybe even the Packers if Devontae Adams were to leave and Aaron Rodgers were to stay, whatever goes on there, I just think that there's a lot of teams that are going to be pursuing Calvin Ridley. He's going to have a big market. Just don't think that the Giants are necessarily in the best position to pursue him.
Yeah, I mean, the Giants aren't in a good position to pursue anybody for that matter. We kind of are in a really tough spot coming off the regimen of hell. So I kind of feel
Thanks, Dave Gettleman.
Yeah, I mean, the guy really just said he went to the last game of the season, had a great time with his family, laughed, had a couple chuckles, retired, and here we are. But you know what I'll say? Thanks, Dave Gettleman, for finally giving us management who seems to be competent. I'm not going to coin them as anything just yet. I have faith. I have faith as an optimist. I have faith. However, I want to see it on the freaking field. I am tired of watching nonsense and seeing the blah, blah, rah, rah speeches. We haven't heard much of it, by the way. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll have done a great job being realistic. And Joe Schoen has said, our offensive line is a mess. Our cap space is a mess. Like, he's not saying we're going to go in there and save the white collar workers of New York and we're going to make everybody rich again and famous. He's not saying that. He's saying what is left for us is a pile of steaming hot horse shit. And we have to fix it. And I appreciate the honesty because Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman never took responsibility for the absolute shit show they left behind. And it's nice to see that we have management in here that is acknowledging how awful of a position we currently are in. So that's great. I like that. However, now we need to see the moves they make. Joe Schoen said recently he's already done his draft evaluations of the first 4 rounds with the Buffalo Bills. They've already covered all of it. They know what's going on. They know what players they like. We saw him at the Senior Bowl chatting about and looking at guys. So this is going to be fun. I'm excited to see their strategy, what they're going to do, what opportunities arise, and what they take advantage of. If they get more draft capital, the players they look to grab. This is interesting. We're seeing a lot of new guys kind of seeing their stock rise in recent days. The combine's going to see guys skyrocket. Who knows? Trayvon Walker, a guy that's really elevating. Danielle Jeremiah has him going at 5 to the Giants. They have him going Drake London at 7. So it's really interesting to see all the different players being mocked to the Giants. Kayvon Thibodeau, he even said that Kayvon Thibodeau is going to drop. If that means he's dropping to 7, 8, 9, 10, who knows? But hell, he was considered the number 1 pick a month ago. So a lot of stuff is going on, guys. We'll keep you updated on any new information, any new mock drafts, perspective, and whatnot. I'm excited to break it down in the future, of course, and we'll have any information capable, to you guys as soon as possible. But make sure to leave a like and subscription below on YouTube, as always, my friends. And we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants video.
TVSO.